Welcome back to the Wildboro podcast. And I am here for the second episode of the new interview series, Inside the Dome. And I am inside the dome here with Milsia. And I'm really excited to hear your story, Milsia. We met at the Mojave Center a couple months ago. And you kind of struck me as the archetype of what I want to highlight here, which is the story of you had more of like a corporate job in New York City. And now, we met building these earth domes out in the desert. So let's just get right into it. How did this come about? And let's hear your story.
Yeah, so like you had said earlier, go back as far as needed. And so I'd like to start off telling my story with being, a 6-year-old artist. My parents were really supportive. They put me into art classes every weekend. I was super influenced by all these unconventional people, always training me to think outside the box, look at things differently, kind of honing the tool of having, 1, imagination, and 2, perspective, and being in like full control of that, right? So as a kid, that was really instilled in me, for better or for worse, by my parents, who were just trying to do the best thing they could for me, but really I don't think they understood that I was being so influenced in this artistic capacity, right? And so I excelled in those areas. I had really supportive parents. I was a first generation American. My dad had a really difficult immigration process here. He is a brilliant man. I would say he could have been like world-class engineer level, but English was his second language. And so anyways, there was a lot of pressure in my world before leaving corporate America to be the best and, do great and be good and all those things. So I followed this creative path with the encouragement of my very conventional family, surprisingly, and ended up, going to art college. And like I said, I had this foundation year where Tyler School of Art, which happens to be in Pennsylvania, and offers a foundation year where you can dabble in different types of pursuits. And that was a big appeal to me. A lot of the colleges didn't have that. So like I mentioned to you before, but there was a lot of like white guys choosing this graphic design path. And so I made a very conscious decision, like I want to make money and I want to make the same salary these guys are making. So I chose that. But I also had a minor in art ed, and it was really uncommon to have a dual major in this college that I went to. Nobody was doing that. And I was like kind of not doing good at both things because I was a little spread too thin. But my point is that I made a deliberate choice to choose graphic design towards the end. I was pretty close to getting an art education degree, and I dropped it. And my professors in the graphic design program were like, look, like you have to choose, one or the other. And so I chose graphic design. And at the time, it was 2008, and it was like before Instagram, before any of these like Canva, AI, all that stuff. So it was a very different field, completely different field. And I was also really, a painter by nature because I had all those classes. And that's what got me into 7 universities in the country for painting. Including RISD, which is the best art school in the world at the time. And I was really mad at my mom. This is a side note, but I was really mad at my mom because she didn't want me to go there. And this is a good story, actually. And but so I was really mad at her because I was like, you don't want me to go to the best art school in the country? Like, what's wrong with you? And she's like, I just don't want you to have that debt. And so I went to the one that I had the most scholarships at, which was Tyler in Pennsylvania. We're both from Pennsylvania. And I had like no debt, when I graduated college. And so then I got a great job. So it was 2008. The markets had crashed in terms of real estate, and I didn't really know what that meant at that time. I was so young. but I could feel it. Obviously, we all probably could. I don't know. I think you graduated a couple years after me, but so anyways, I 2008 applied to all these jobs. I remember I was in this dusty warehouse working for a book manufacturing company. It was the first job I got out of college. I couldn't even breathe, and it was just covered in dust. The computer was ancient, and I was designing pamphlets for them, and I was applying for jobs on the job,
Okay.
and I got fired, but it was right at the time that I got hired by Abercrombie and Fitch in Ohio,
Oh, wow.
and they had flown me to Columbus, Ohio, and I was fresh out of college. It was the first year, so I don't know, 24 or something, and yeah, I was making more than like both my parents combined, like right out of school, and it was like a really good achievement, like on paper, but yeah, it was Abercrombie and Fitch's heyday. They had this campus, people were flying around on scooters, and there was this crazy CEO, and I was sitting in on those meetings, and there was budgets were limitless. I was getting flown around the country to like go on like trips to like Trend Spot and stuff like that. I would go to like music festivals to create presentations for CEOs in like the fashion world and all that stuff. But I think the reason why I got that job too, similar to how I got into all those schools, was because I was a good illustrator and painter. And so I had these like traditional hand skills, but I also knew how to use a computer, and I was really smart with like technology, which is like I outsmarted you here too. So
This podcast would not be happening without Milsia fixing my GarageBand recording.
yeah, and you're the developer.
Supposedly. Allegedly.
Allegedly. Yeah, shout out to Peter. Aw, I like that word. Anyway, so yeah, I get this great job, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, and then I got really frustrated and basically knew I wanted to leave Ohio. I had a boyfriend back east, and so I started applying for jobs again. I got a job in New York City with Gap.
Wow.
Moved to New York City. They paid me to move. They recruited me. It was like very fancy life. Yeah. Very fancy life. And then I get to New York, and yeah, it was just like corporate lifestyle for sure.
Yeah.
But it felt so incongruent, Rich. It was like nauseating to me to sit on those meetings when they're talking about like printing a T-shirt, for example, right? Like you're wearing a graphic T-shirt that says Colorado. Like that's what I would do. I would draw those drawings and the graphics, and then they would mass produce them, right? And so, but then they're doing like millions and millions of SKUs, and it's like, what's the profit margin? And nobody's talking about these chemicals and the dye and the ramifications that it has on the factory workers or the water in these countries, primarily like India, Vietnam, Brazil, where these things are being made. And, I would bring these things up, and I get these looks, like who got this girl in here,
Yeah.
So it was bad, like, and I actually felt it was sad because it's like, I tried to do everything right by my family, and there's a whole other story there about seeking approval or whatever, but that's different podcast maybe, but like, just this lavish lifestyle of like, okay, my parents were super proud. My dad was like always bragging about me to people, and oh, my daughter, she does really well, and she's got this great job, and she travels all over, and he wouldn't say that to me, but he'd say it to other people.
Yeah.
And I would hear about it from other people, like how he felt. But
now, you mentioned you were thinking more about the humanitarian impact of the work you're doing. I mean, where did that come from?
That's a really good question, actually. Yeah, that's a really good question. Where did that come from? I think it's the fine artist thing. I think people who paint and draw are by nature like deep meditators. And when you're doing like 3-hour classes as a kid, which I was very privileged to do, and this is also why I think our country is eliminating these programs, because they know that this is they can't control that individual's mind the same way that they can control other people's minds. So I had this, like I said, this amazing upbringing. Another critical component to my artistic background and education was this program called Arts High, and it was something where in high school I was able to go to a college with a professor every week for a semester and sit in on a college level class and obtain college level credits. So I was doing 3-hour courses, of painting, just like staring at one object and then coming back to it week after week after week. And so you become really in tune with like yourself, your inner voice, your surroundings, and it's a very meditative process. And so your mind is not as malleable as somebody who's just sort of like going through the motions. And I think being in those settings where it's like the more malleable you are, the more successful you will be in the chain of command, in my opinion. Of course, there's wonderful people, I would hope, that are still in corporate America, like doing the right thing, but the ethics are just really amiss, in my opinion. And so, especially with fashion. So fashion is, if not the most polluting industry on the planet, I think, second to like agriculture, like mass, like mono produce, like, almonds in California or whatever. Like that's very polluting, and shipping them all over the country is very polluting. I think fashion or agriculture is like competing for number one as like the most polluting. Wow. So anyway, as someone who's like a naturalist and like was painting things with these art teachers outside and appreciating nature, you kind of just like become like one with the world, and you understand that your actions have an impact on other people and things around you. And so in those meetings, I think that voice was just kicking in. And I could tell that my peers knew that about me. And some of them, like, were trying to protect me. And some of them were like, she's got to go,
Wow.
And there's a couple that I keep in touch with from that time, but not really. So I lost a lot of friendships and stuff.
Yeah. And how far into that, how long had you been at Gap when this like conflict started happening?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So that's a great question. So I started my career in 2008 in corporate fashion, making a great salary. And then it was 2010 that I moved to New York City. And then for 4 years, I was in that world. And then for the last couple of years, I started teaching art. So that's actually kind of funny because I went back to my like minor that I dropped, and I was like, okay, I'm going to teach art. But there was a part of, so hiking in the Himalayas, when I was doing that, I kept asking myself questions when I was hiking in the Himalayas, and I kept trying to get to the core of like, what could I do that's the least like impactful in a negative way on the planet, and it was like art teaching.
Okay.
And so I got that message, and so when I got back to New York, I quit my job and started teaching. Yeah.
Well, tell me more about this trip to the Himalayas. How did that come about? And
that was a wonderful story. I might get emotional. That's just like a crazy serendipitous chain of events that I'm really, really grateful happened. But yeah, I lived in New York City. I had this apartment that was like actually really chill. It was like a 4-bedroom, like had a car. It was just one level, backyard, willow tree, fire pit. There was a washer dryer, and anyway.
All the things I don't have here.
Yeah. I don't have them in Bend. Like I haven't had them. It just was like this wild thing. So anyway, I had this cool apartment. I kind of got grandfathered into it. All the other housemates from the original lease like moved on, found a partner or whatever, and I just had this apartment for like 8 years in New York that was like a castle. It was just like awesome. Yeah. So I got to cherry pick like who lived there. But one of the people that moved in was a sibling, not sibling. Yeah, it was a sibling of my roommate's boyfriend. So my roommate, and we were the original lease signers, she partnered with this wonderful guy. They moved on together. And then his brother moved in. And his brother lived downstairs. And I'm like this like corporate baddie, like going to CrossFit every day and like yoga every night and whatever. I was like in my goddess era. and he like sees me and basically starts pursuing me as a like romantic interest. And yeah, and then we had this like amazing time together, and basically he turned me into the outdoors woman I am today.
Wow.
Yeah. We would go on like trips every weekend together and stuff like that. And he also encouraged me to take psychedelics actually.
Yeah.
So that was another component,
Yeah.
which is kind of fun to talk about.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, so and then essentially he had this trip coming up to the Himalayas with his 3 guy friends, and he's like, at the time I had a different name, so Milsia is my middle name, Stephanie's my New York name, and so he's like, you know, Steph, like, you know, I'm doing this trip to the Himalayas. I'm like, well, I'm fucking going with you. Like, you're not gonna go. Like, I'm going. And he's like, well, you know, you work this job, you know, whatever. And I'm like, no, I'm quitting this job, you know. So I went to them to see if I could get one of those like leave of absence, like 3 or 4 months. They didn't approve it because I was like the unconventional one that they didn't want there anyway. So they're just like, no, you need to go. You know, like you're always bringing up these questions about recycling fabrics and stuff, and we don't want to talk to you. So you need to go.
This is a problem.
I think so. Yeah, but now they do this stuff, right? So it's like it's always like I feel like I was just like 10 years too early or something, you know, like. So I have to celebrate that, but in the time it was really hard to like experience that like estrangement from my job and lack of,
And what was the main motivation to go on the trip? I mean, to be with this new romance?
My boyfriend.
Or was this, were you starting to see this as maybe like an escape from the
Yeah.
corporate world?
No, absolutely.
Okay.
I was like, I'm done. Like, I was just like, let's fucking go, you know? And so, I got all my...
I did just want to bring up, you know, Jared, he was talking about, like, he had a base of financial stability.
Yeah.
I mean, were you in a place where you know, that wasn't a big deal to take the time off?
No, and that's something I think is really important for people to hear, and I think the same is true for you because you're the base too. It sucks, but you have to leverage the system.
Yes.
And I was like a little squirrel, and I would just like live off of 10% of my salary, and I saved the rest of it. But nobody else was doing that. They were like going to the bars and they were partying.
I kind of wanted to ask you about that. I mean, what was the rest of your lifestyle kind of more congruent with, you know, the corporate life, which to me is like happy hour, you know, the drinking and the big spending?
I would never go.
Was your lifestyle already way different?
I would never do any of those things.
Yeah.
And then when I did do those things, I felt really uncomfortable. And that's another thing when they knew I wasn't one of them, you know. And they still know that, like even today, because I've tried to get back into the game to just get some more coin or whatever. And they can like sniff it on me. So it's not possible. But
I didn't mean to take you off track.
No. Yeah, but the Himalayas. So,
so
like,
you're talking about how that.
So Zach really influenced me to do that trip, or really I was like, I'm going with you. You're not going to go without me. Yeah. And so then I'm walking this thing, and we have that in common as well, I guess, because you're a thru hiker. I'm not a thru hiker, but the Himalayas is quite a long hike. Yep. And I just kept repeating to myself, like, what can I do? And I kept answering the question internally. And it was such an interesting process. I think I was a little bit stoned too. Yeah. But yeah, so
this is a family-friendly podcast. This is it is an important part of your story. So of course, feel free to share all the details.
Well, just I mean, I won an award when I was a kid that was like against drugs. You know, like dare keep kids off drugs. Yeah. But then I met Zach, and so Zach was like, okay, he is like. And still, like the purest heart I've ever come across in my life or will ever encounter. And he accredited that instantly to his psychedelic experience when he was 15. Wow. So I was like, what? Like this person who I think is like amazing. And meanwhile, I'm so conventional at this point. I'm corporate girl, you know, conventional parents or traditional, you know, and I have this lovely, amazing boyfriend that is just like, just a saint, you know, and he's like, well, you know, it's because I did this, and this. And I'm like, what are these things? You know, like, what are you talking about? And so anyway, he really opened my mind to that. And then we did the Himalayas. And like I did this path. There's like one stretch of it where, like I said, I was asking myself this question, what can I do for work? What can I do for work? Well, not this and not this. and then like, but what are my goals and why am I here and why, you know, just going down this rabbit hole. What else are you going to do when you're like walking a billion miles, you know? And then at the bottom of it, I was like, okay, you have to teach art. Like, that's the only thing you can do that's like not going to harm other people. So that's what I did. But then I realized when I got back to New York, I couldn't afford the lifestyle. So I had this 4-bedroom apartment, and I was like Airbnb-ing all the rooms. Zach and I broke up when we got back from that trip. That's another conversation. But like, he left early. He's like, I can't hang. I got to go back. I'm like, this is too hard for me. I kept going. Yeah. So I went to like Thailand, and I went to Laos, and I just kept going. I was like, I quit my job. I'm doing this. Like I'm doing our original plan, you know. And he had a leave of absence too, so he was like paid to go and stuff. So like anyway, so he came back. So when I got back to New York, we broke up. We tried to make it work, and whatever. That's like a whole other story. But so then I'm stuck with this 4-bedroom apartment, but I'm using it as a way to make money. I made more money renting rooms in my apartment than I did as a teacher. So I was teaching art, and I was making like $12,000 a year, but then I was making $40,000 on my apartment as an Airbnb. And my neighbor had been there since the 80s, and he hated that I was doing that, so he was like threatening to get me shut down. But meanwhile, I was like trying to do good for my community, and I don't think he could see that. And I don't think he could see that I was like trying to teach in inner city Queens, making no money, and leverage the somewhat real estate investment that I had, even though I was a renter. But I was living in the unit, so it was actually like a very acceptable Airbnb situation, because you're not, at the time it was like you shouldn't be renting a unit that you're not occupying yourself, because they were trying to prevent all these like crazy, you know, real estate investors for like blocking affordable housing and stuff like that. So I was actually like in a pretty good position, because then I'm making, you know, whatever, 50, 60,000. I'm like, okay, I can do this. But because of the neighbor, I kind of gave up. I was like tired, and I didn't want to have bad blood with my neighbor. And then that's how that ended. And then I was never rehired like for a full-time position. I've done like some freelance stuff in corporate since. But yes, the money thing, I had to save like a squirrel. Yeah. And I'm not joking when I say that. Like, I lived off of like 10% of my salary. So yeah, I don't think this is achievable. I mean, I think there are ways to do it, but it's harder. Yeah. Yes. If you don't have like a stack of cash, right? Like there is a strategy there. Yeah. Yeah.
So you get back from the Himalayas, the renting thing falls through. I guess at some point you left New York City. You want to talk about that time period and where you went from there?
Okay. That was crazy.
Here we go.
Wow, that's so beautiful though. Thank you so much for asking that question. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. Like it's such a hard, like kind of a hard story to share. Like I said earlier, I don't feel like I'm like completely out of the woods yet, you know. Okay. So all right, so we lose the apartment, and we're like, Mom and Dad, I gotta get rid of all my things. And I get rid of all my things. And and all of my things. Like, I had a trunk worth of stuff. Like, yeah. So then they were saints, actually. Me and my parents have like a kind of crazy relationship, but at this point they were saints, and they helped me get rid of all my stuff and like put everything in boxes, and I stored some things in their house. And
why were you getting rid of all your things?
Because I had no plan. I had no idea like what I was going to do for work, where I was going to live. I knew I couldn't really live with them from an emotional standpoint. Okay, so I'm not a Republican, let's say, and they are, and so I didn't really want to live in a house like that.
Like, were you still teaching art, or had that already ended?
Yeah, I think that ended. I did like a summer. I realized, because I couldn't make it work. Like, I couldn't see a way to make it work, like on that salary. Yeah.
Got it. And then, so you basically just hit a point where it was like you had to get out of your apartment, and you didn't know what you were doing after that? Or?
Well, actually, so I had a guy that was living with me I forget his name, Ryan. He's a saint too, and he was awesome. He was probably my best housemate, and so he kind of took over my lease. I was like, Ryan, I gotta go. I was like, I didn't want to give up my lease completely, but I got rid of all my belongings. I said, I don't know what's gonna happen, but I gotta go. Like, this isn't working. And so I stayed on the lease. I had been there for 4 years. My landlord knew. She was used to me writing. It was a $4,000 check every month, so she was used to me writing that every month. So I just kept doing that, and then Ryan was there, and then we got other people in the space, and I was still writing the checks when I was traveling. So that was another component. Like, I felt like I had that place to go back to if I had to, but none of my belongings, like they were Ryan's at that point. Like, I was like, you can keep all this stuff, or mom and dad put stuff in the house, whatever. And so I got in my 98 Camry, and I started driving. Yeah, and I drove to Shenandoah, but I wasn't really interested in that area. I didn't like Virginia. I felt really unsafe as a single female. I was much younger, like early 30s at the time, and people were looking at me, like mostly men, like at rest stops, and I just felt really unsafe in Virginia and that area. So I kept going, Blue Ridge Parkway. So then I got to Blue Ridge Parkway. Still felt really unsafe, actually. And I was camping. Like, I would just find places to pitch a tent. I stopped at REI at one point. I spent $500, and that was like all of my gear. And then I just had like a couple things in my trunk. And then I was on the road for like 4 months.
Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't have a plan. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
What were you feeling at that time? I mean, that's a pretty drastic thing to get rid of all your life belongings. Did people think that like you had gone insane or something?
Yeah. Wait, did we go over that a little bit before? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And like, what were you thinking? I mean, were you kind of like, what's going on, or you were like, this is just what needs to be happening now? Or?
That's such a good question. I just felt like nothing made sense. Nothing made sense. Like, I just was like, I did everything right. That didn't make sense. And then, like, my neighbors couldn't see that I was trying to do, like, good for my community in New York. And I didn't feel supported or, like, that could sustained, by that career change or my community. That didn't make sense. And then my Republican family, that, like, supposedly loved me but wanted me to be a certain way, that didn't make sense either. So nothing made sense, So I just was like, I got to keep going until I find a place that feels like something makes sense.
You were just like, I need to leave that situation, or?
Yeah, kind of like a bat out of hell, honestly. I didn't even say goodbye to anybody.
Wow.
I didn't, like, I was in New York for, like, 8 years at that point. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're on your big adventure, I guess.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah, well, so I was teaching myself how to fly drones at that point. I kind of got bored of it, but I was, like, flying drones in the landscapes. My dad was really into drones. He used to build them, like, from scratch. So I had, like, a DJI Mavic Pro, and I'd, like, fly it and, like, film. Like, I probably have some, like, cool footage on that thing, actually. Yeah. Anyway, and so I don't know. There's like a lot of, like, romantic stuff that came up too, which I don't need to get into really, but Portland felt like the end goal. So Portland, Oregon was like the end goal. The critical piece there, though, is that all of my friends from New York moved there, and they all had these corporate jobs that translated. So it was like Gap and Kate Spade and American Eagle, who I worked for in New York City. My friends from those companies moved to Portland. They were posting on Instagram, like, these, like, nature trails and things. And I was like, oh, cool. They kept their job, but they also were able to be in the wilderness and have access to all these things that I find really healing after being with Zach and all this stuff. So, yeah, so I thought if I got to Portland, I would have like the best of both worlds. And that is like not what happened for me. So, but those folks didn't live on the road for 4 months camping out of their vehicle. I did that, and I think it changed me. The other component is, the ayahuasca experience.
Yeah.
So
Tell us about that. Because, previously you've told me, and that seemed like a really critical part of this whole journey.
Yeah, so Zach influenced me to explore psychedelics because of his pure spirit. Like I said, I've never encountered anything like that before. I still hold him with like the highest regard. And so I wanted that for myself, right? Like once he left my life, we chose to separate, I was like, okay, I need that for myself. So how can I achieve it? And he accredited that as to how he became who he was at that time when I met him. So then I'm like, I gotta learn about these things. So I started going to meetup.com at the time. It was still in New York. And the way that you could access psychedelics and specifically ayahuasca and stuff was through meetup.com. And it was these groups, and you had to kind of go through an interview process. And then they'd have they had called them like integration circles. And so really I was like observing people who had already taken these things and like the integration afterwards, or like what they were talking about afterwards. And I was like, okay, I don't want to mess around with like MDMA. I don't want to mess around with any of the superficial like LSD, this like sort of stuff. Like I want like the big thing. Like, and there was one woman who really embodied the energy that I was sort of like wanting for myself, and she had taken the medicine like 200 times or something, like, and she was like giggling about it, like, and so I was like, whatever you're doing, sister, it's working. Like that's what I want, So anyways, my ayahuasca experience though, like, wasn't that cool. Like it was like not in the best setting, looking back on it, I probably would have wanted to go to like the jungle with friends and, or not with friends, but just in a more natural setting. It ended up being like a couple blocks away from where I lived. Like they disclosed the address once after you sign up for the ceremony, and it was just I could walk to it and then walk home, which was kind of crazy. But yeah, it changed me in the sense of like, it gave me what it is that it eliminated my fear of dying. So I have no fear of dying. Yeah.
If you want to, can you describe the experience and how did it lead to you not fearing death?
The ceremony, ayahuasca ceremony? Well, it's different for everyone. I guess that was the message that I needed to receive at the time, I guess. I'm not really sure. It's very hard to put these things into words. Yeah. Everyone will say that has had the real experience. So leading up to it, there's like a dieta. And they say like the plant chooses you. You don't choose the plant. And I believe that, and I don't think everyone should now go off on an ayahuasca journey if they want to go build domes or whatever. Like, no, like that plant is not for every human on this planet, and do not force it at all. So, I did a dieta, and I was researching online YouTube videos and stuff, which was still relatively new on the topic at that time. I want to remember the year. I guess it was 2017 at that point. So almost 10 years ago, which I keep saying. But also there was like the solar eclipse or some like crazy lunar eclipse that happened that year. And I just felt like I wanted to line everything up with that. So I did the ayahuasca and then started my road trip like all around the same time. Actually, I filmed. There was like the eclipse, and I was using that the drone to film that. But anyway, ayahuasca. I did the dieta. I like meditated a bunch. I was like bathing with this stone that I had from Bend. It's a big obsidian, and just did all this like energetic work on myself leading up to it. I took it pretty serious in that way. Yeah, like you're not supposed to have like any spices or salts, or it's just like rice and vegetables for like a couple weeks. Yeah, and then sat in on the ceremony. I felt like I didn't get a lot out of the first cup, so I actually got a second cup, and then that like blew my mind open. But basically the way I describe it is that it was like a television screen of my life, and I was like watching the screen play, and then all of a sudden somebody took the plug and pulled it out, and then it like went fuzzy, and then you get overtaken by this other thing. And so then this like whatever Gaia or something kind of like went into my system and was kind of like drawing attention to all these things that needed attention from a very like physiological standpoint. And then it was even like it kind of like hijacked my body and was sort of like making me move in ways that I wasn't feeling fully in control of, and just being like really gentle and kind to myself. It was like a lot of like overwhelming like love and nurturing towards myself that came out of that. But the visual of watching my whole life play through, and then that plugging out, and then this other thing overtaking my consciousness, that's what I believe will happen when I die again. Like, I believe that will happen.
Yeah.
I will see that again. Yeah.
As you're saying that, it's just making me think of like you kind of had these two parts of you, and it's like you have the part of you that's sitting in the meetings, you know, thinking, hey, is what we're doing right here? And it's kind of like everything is constantly, you know, repressing that. And it's like that needed to be, you know, nurtured. You needed to sort of take care of that part of you.
Yeah. Well, that's good feedback. Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that. And so you said you don't fear death as a result.
Yeah, so then I go on the road trip, and that's when I'm like not attached to any of my things or people or whatever. Yeah.
It really is like you know the plug was pulled on your life.
Yeah,
your
absolutely.
Life.
I lost everything. Yeah. I lost my career. I lost what my relationship was with my family. All my friends from corporate, all gone.
Yeah.
My identity, like just. Yeah, it was part of my lesson.
Did you feel liberated in some way? Or was it more like fear and confusion?
Yeah, at that point, I mean, the road trip was amazing. Yeah. Like, I was not – it was – what I wasn't prepared for was it was a 7-year journey, I believe. And no one really talked about that, you know, and that was just what it was for me. That might not be what it is for other people, and I'm actually very grateful for that now. Yeah. But so I don't know. I mean,
So you hit the road. You kind of had a long-term goal of making it to Portland. It sounded like. Did you make it to Portland, or how long?
Yeah, so I went to every national park I could in this country, and I slept in my tent in every national park. That I could. I don't remember how many, but it was a lot. Yeah. And it was great. It was wonderful, and it made me really appreciate this country so much and the beauty here. There was so many wonderful themes. One of them was like. Love and romance. Like, I stayed with a lot of couples from New York at different places. Like, one was in Tucson, actually, and they also had road tripped and decided to land in Tucson at the time. And, they were, like, modeling love for me. And then Boulder, there was a couple I was hanging out with. So there was, like, a theme there. And so, there was, like, somebody in Portland that I was about to meet. Like, we were writing letters to each other for a while. And even in New York, and so that was part of it. And then I got there, it didn't go anywhere. So then I'm like, okay, I'm in Portland, you know. And it just then there was like this whole level of heartache. So then it was like everything that I wanted to happen wasn't happening. So like I wanted to get a job back in corporate because I was like, okay, whatever, I did my trip, like, you know, I just want to make some money again, and it just wasn't coming together. And then my identity was like shifting, and so then I'm like losing friends, and so they're like, you're not who you used to be, And so they just like would just ignore me or not include me on things. So then the grief part started kicking in. So then there was a lot of grief after that.
And what got you through the grief? I mean, just reflecting on my own experience, it was really hard losing relationships, but at the same time, it's like it was sort of a feeling of liberation and freedom, and I guess more like conviction. You know, I felt like I was finally doing what I wanted to do. That's kind of what got me through those times. But what got you through?
I mean,
those hard
honestly,
times?
Rich, like I said, I'm still in the woods. Like meeting people like you or even Tom and people who can articulate stuff in that way is a reminder for me that I need to look at stuff like that. You know, there's still a part of me that's really, I would say, like tortured by, you know, like letting those people down or not being who they wanted me to be, you know. So,
Yeah, like you said, it's still sort of in progress. I think this is a lifelong journey. I'm kind of at a point where, you know, just a few days ago, two of my high school friends were here helping finish the dome, and we did go, you know, 5 or 6 years without talking.
Oh,
and
nice. Wow.
So things are starting to come around full circle for me, and so, you know, I hope that'll happen for you, you know, as it's appropriate with the right people.
Yeah.
And I know those guys really enjoyed being here and got a lot out of it. So it's like I have this new thing I can share with them now. But that, you know, that's one of the things that resonated about your story with me. That was probably the most difficult part of the whole thing for me, losing all those relationships, you know, all of my friends from high school, college, and all my family. And it's kind of just like, what's the most important thing in life? You know, I was able to keep going because, like that inner voice, you know, that you finally kind of gave a chance that has, you know, that can sustain you despite everything else.
Yeah. I mean, you have really inspired me to lean into that more, like in the last couple months even. Yeah.
So I guess let's keep going on the story. So you said you're in Portland, things aren't quite working out.
At all.
And you know, this is important, I think, because there's going to be struggles, you know, and
well, it's like you could look at it like, oh, I had this great life. I had this salary. I saved up all this money. And I did do all of these things and then had this amazing cross-country journey, which I did document on Instagram. And then, like, people were seeing it. And the other component is, too, I made all these paintings. So I was, like, painting every day on the road. And I ended up selling, like, half of them recently. But, like... it was great. It was amazing. Like I afforded myself this amazing time to like make art, and I structured my day with like the sun rising and the sun setting, and that was it. That was like time for me, you know? But it was like lonely, and there were times where it was like I just wish that there were other people with me or my family or and sharing meals has now become so important to me. You know, and like community has now become so important to me. I mean, currently my life is structured in such a way where I am around people all the time, and I'm choosing that. So, you know, I'm a caregiver, and I'm cooking for these people, and I'm doing activities with them. And I live with a mom and her kid, you know, to be around multi-generations of people and be around that creativity of the kid. And I share meals with the mom, and we help each other out. And so it's like sort of like this unconventional, somewhat single, you know, almost 40-year-old woman, like kind of like trying to, cultivate like meaning and purpose and connection in a very like unconventional sense, I would say. But
so you live in Bend now. Do you want to tell us how you ended up there?
Well, I mean, it wasn't that complicated, but Portland wasn't working. I was there for 2 years, a lot of heartache. Essentially, I mean, unabashedly, I had a mental health crisis, I would say. And I think that's part of my journey, for better or for worse. And it's hard to say that because I don't think a lot of people would want to like identify with that, or they might see this as like a really negative thing. I don't. But that was part of it for me, was like losing that identity of who like I was in New York and stuff, and there is a crisis that comes with that. Like, you know, So I lived through that, and I leaned on the support of like mental health specialists and again psychedelics. So I was taking microdoses of mushrooms to kind of keep my dopamine high and stuff, and it did help.
Yeah.
And I would like pray into the mushrooms and set an intention, and then I would take them. That was the advice that was given to me, and so that was the medication that I used during that time, and then I worked like all these like random jobs, but I don't even see that as like working. So I kind of feel like I didn't really work for like, 7 years kind of. So anyways, Portland wasn't working, and then someone had a room for rent in Bend, and at the time I was like an outdoor instructor. So it's funny because I went from working for Columbia as a UX designer, so I got a contract with them through being very sick with mental health issues. Like I went on that interview and I was like that night checking into like a crisis care center.
Wow.
And then I was like interviewing and then getting the job. And then I would show up like in the cubicle, and like I would have like panic attacks, and I would like go into a closet and I would like call a friend and I would say like I'm struggling like right now. She'd like help me get through it on the phone, and one other guy in the office, his name's Jeremy, he knew what was going on for me, and we're still friends and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I was just like working on this computer with like people like yourself, like a team of developers, and then all the UX people or the UI, and the copywriters and the photographers and all that stuff. And I was doing kind of a little bit what I was doing in New York, and I was getting these like panic attacks.
Was it mostly like the grief of losing the connections, or just your identity, if you want to get into that? And like, were you starting to make new friends and new community?
No, at that time I wasn't attracting the right people, and I knew that because I wasn't in a good headspace, and the projection I had of myself, it was a lot of like self-criticism and self-doubt and self-questioning, and that was running my life at that point. So it was like I had this incredible high of like Himalayas, like road trip across the country, and then it was just this like crash after. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the reality,
Yeah.
You're trying to get to the life that you want, and there's this huge, valley or maybe a mountain or something in the way. It sounds like you had a lot of work to do to realize, the life that you want.
I couldn't make sense. I'm like, okay, like this is how I've made money in the past. Like, what else am I supposed to do? So yeah, just nothing made sense. I don't know. Still, or at that point. So anyway, and then there was a room that opened up in Bend, and I was on this cusp of like, okay, either go back east. I kind of had some semblance of mental health established, like through things. I mean, it got pretty dark at that time in Portland. So, and people were very concerned about me. I mean, my best friend from childhood came across the country and basically tried to do an intervention. And I was like, look, like if I go back, it has to be on my terms. I can't just be forced to go. I have to decide. I have to choose it. Otherwise, I'm going to go back there and I'm going to be miserable. So she let me stay in Oregon. And then I kept trying to make it work. But Bend was like the last push. So I was like, okay. Basically, after Columbia Sportswear, I got this email from this company called Avid for Adventure. I was creating these emails, and there was like this company, Avid for Adventure. And they were new to Portland, and they were doing outdoor instruction. And I was like, I should just do that after this contract ends, because I knew I wasn't going to keep it. Like people knew I was like not my best self. And so I was like, this will heal me, like to be out with kids and nature and all this stuff. And so I was 35 or something, hanging out with a bunch of 25-year-olds, like a 10-year older person, like as an outdoor instructor for a camp for kids, Avid for Adventure. And all the kids, like, or younger counselors were really obsessed with Bend, Oregon. And they were just like, man, that place is amazing. The outdoor is amazing. The rivers, the activities, the mountain biking, the skiing, the hiking. I'm like, okay, that's what I want. I want to be in that spot in the world. So yeah, then that summer ended, and it did what it needed to do, like being around the kids, teaching them how to bike,
Wow.
teaching them how to hike, like, you know, being on the trails and showing them like this is what I love and this is why I love these things. Doing art with them in nature, you know, like not making any fucking money, like, you know, like, but like it was just what I needed, you know, to kind of like get out of that like panic attack state in these like cubicles, you know, like, so yeah, anyway, and then that company was starting a branch in Bend. And so I kind of leveraged that a little bit and got to scope it out. And then there was a room for rent. So I ended up in Bend, Oregon. And it has been a very healing place for me to kind of evolve. Yeah.
It's interesting that it was like you were in New York and you tried the teaching thing and it didn't work out, and then it was sort of the reverse in Portland. The corporate thing didn't work, and now finally this teaching thing.
Yeah.
Sounds like that's what started to help you get out of the really
that's a good observation. Yeah. I think there's like a part of me that knew that I should be a teacher, or that was the way through this world for me. But I shut it down, right? Like, it's like I wanted to make money because I'm first gen. I didn't want to be poor. And I was like, no, I'm going to do this. And I'm going to, like, you know, go up the corporate chain or whatever. But that's what made me unwell. Like incongruent with myself. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the voice that was talking to you in the Himalayas from what you said. And it seems like you were able to start to tap into that.
Well, yeah, it never went away. Like, it's always there, but it's always for me. It's felt like two worlds, two things at odds with each other, right? So my work lately has been to quiet the other voice that's trying to be more logical and practical and all that stuff. But yeah, I think I'm definitely like honing in on something now. Like, I feel, but like I said, I'm still in the woods. Yeah. But I feel like I'm figuring out like a way through. Yeah.
So, was that kind of, you said you were in this really dark place. I mean, do you feel like you're kind of on an upward trajectory since then? Or are things getting easier for you over time? And you've been in Bend for a while, so has that helped you? As you said, it was a healing. It's been a healing place for you. Do you want to tell us kind of what your life is like and how you've constructed that, you know, to benefit yourself?
I mean, the main thing is like my life is absolutely in service of other people. Like, that's it. Yeah. So I'm a single person without children, and I'm a woman. So like I've had to come up with like really creative ways to be of service to like other people. Yeah. And lean into that. And I'm starting to realize like I just have to lean really hard into that, and that things are going to work out like really awesome.
Are you still teaching in any form?
I was, Bend Parks and Rec, and teaching kids and stuff. But that, unfortunately, with the climate today, like a lot of the people that Parks and Rec serves are not budgeting for these classes, and so there was like low enrollment. But there are like private schools that I can do. I kind of am like a little bit burnt on the kid thing though, so I kind of want to work with more adults, I feel like. So I might try to give that a shot. Yeah.
And you said you do a lot of things in service to others.
The caregiving mostly. Yeah.
And that's great. I'm curious what you're. So I'm gonna reference a previous podcast episode, which you probably haven't heard, but there's this Martin Luther King speech where he talks about like the three dimensions of a complete life, and one of them is service to others, and one of them is kind of like self-love and cultivating. He calls it your own center of creativity.
Cool.
I mean, how are you pursuing like your own, like what's you know your vision for your life, and what are you doing to realize that?
It's scary to actually put words to like my real big vision, but honestly, like I would love to, like, I don't know if this is possible, but Bend doesn't have an art museum, and I think it's ready for one. So I would love to like start an art museum / school there that's like focused on like fine arts and not just like this kitschy touristy stuff. So that is absolutely like the bigger goal in my heart. But I have to love myself enough and really feel worthy of that pursuit, and I'm getting there, but I haven't been in that space for a little bit.
That's interesting. Because so to, I guess, bring things back to the beginning, we met at the Mojave Center, and so you're obviously interested in natural building or super as well. How does that tie into all this?
So there's so much to that. I mean, Zach was the first person who introduced me to Earthships in New York. My favorite person on the planet. But yeah, he pointed it out on a TV at a thrift store. He's like, "Oh yeah, those are Earthships," and I'm like, "What's that?" And so I learned about them. And then when I was on the road trip, I stopped in Taos, and I did get to tour, all those over there. I didn't like the aesthetic. I actually think they're kind of garish and not my style. I don't like multicolor things and like swirly things. It's too like whimsical for me. But then I also, on my road trip, stopped at Georgia O'Keeffe's home in New Mexico. It's like outside of Albuquerque or something, in Taos, like outskirts. And she's a famous artist who also lived in New York City and then ended up moving to New Mexico after with her like photographer partner maybe. Her house was just like left such an impression on me, and it's an adobe structure. And I always was like, okay, this is what I want, for myself, like even on like a micro scale. And I stayed at one sort of geodesic dome when I was in that region, New Mexico, that for me, I was like, if I just lived like this, I would be completely happy. So it was on Airbnb. It was a geodesic dome, and it was a plot of land that 7 women had bought, and 7 women built different homes, and then they raised like their families and stuff there through the 70s. And then this couple obtained it. I guess they inherited the property and they put it on Airbnb. So it was my first time staying in one, and it was a loft, and there was like a skylight triangle. There was like a clawfoot tub. There was a composting toilet and like a little kitchenette. And there was like a little reading nook. It was kind of like this, but bigger, maybe like 3 times the size of this maybe or something. And I was like, oh, this is all I need, and I would be like completely happy, you know? So that just like planted in my head. I still have it like bookmarked and stuff like that. And then when I saw Nicolette, like somehow either the algorithm or something, I'm not on social media right now, but when I was like, the algorithm like popped it up. And when I saw that it was fireproof after the LA fires, I was like, it was like a fuck yes feeling or like a hell yeah, where I was like, okay, I need to go learn how to do this like right now. This is the way that I can, like maybe build something like, whether it's a museum or a school or a house or anything like, this will give me like the know-how to be able to do it with dirt or whatever. And then it's fireproof because Bend also has like a lot of fires and stuff too. So it was just like this hell yes feeling. And also I just felt like there were people that I would meet, which has happened, that I needed to meet. I just had this feeling of like, and because I love Zach so much too, I'm like, okay, people like him will be there. And that was like running through my brain as well. Like that's where the other Zachs are, like, and it's true. And that is what ended up happening is like meeting all these other people that like I think are really wonderful. So I don't know.
Yeah. And like you said, this is kind of like a still in progress thing for you. I mean, looking back on all this, it's I don't know, what's your feeling about your journey? Like the struggle is real, I'm kind of at a point where that was all really difficult. Like you were talking about, really a lot of dark times, and you can feel very lonely, and you kind of wish you weren't going through it. But I can see now that I learned a lot of things in those times that they're helping me, build kind of how you're describing. I'm building a home that I feel comfortable living in. And I've gained a lot of skills and abilities through the struggle times, learning how to deal with adversity that are helping me accomplish this.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is leading to a question. I guess I kind of just want to get your perspective on your journey so far.
Yeah.
What do you think you've gotten out of it? And
Yeah. I keep coming back to Arizona. Yeah, I mean, the whole opt-out thing is just so cool here, and the whole off-grid thing to me, I mean, it's nothing new. It's, like, been around since forever, really, like, but that, I think, now, looking back on everything, I'm like, oh, this is the way forward, like, tapping out of the system. Like, there is, I mean, it's not, you're not going to completely tap out of the system. You're still going to have to, like, buy things and, like, subscribe to things and have medical bills and stuff like that, groceries maybe, but it is a way to tap out from like a lot of the system, and so that's like appealing to me as like a future, and like I love like the creativity of this stuff too, and that yeah, just like the possibilities or whatever and the types of people it attracts and stuff like that. Yeah.
do you feel more at peace now than when you were sitting in those meetings in New York City?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, yeah, my life is so different. It's like incomparable. Yeah. But we had talked about this too. Like I had journaled about being like a teacher and this and that. The caretaking piece wasn't really in there, but that there's a lot of like karmic expression happening too. So like my uncle is basically is the same as Carol, who I caretake for. So umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck, and like she was a healthy baby until the moment she was born, and then she has all these intellectual like disabilities. My uncle is the same thing.
Wow.
And my mom was tasked with taking care of him, and I observed that, and now I'm taking care of Carol.
Yeah.
And there's like I feel there's like a karmic thing where I'm learning the life of my mother through Carol. Also, my parents on her side were both social workers, so there's so many things where I'm like, oh, my grandparents did this, and this, or whatever I'm thinking of. There's just like a lot all that happening there. So like the work that I'm doing now is like teaching me lessons about like my parents and my ancestors and stuff. So there's stuff happening there that's like working through. Yeah. And then they did everything they could for me not to have that life. And so there's a struggle where I feel like I'm disappointing specifically my parents. And I think I need to like somehow release that or work on that in order to do this next thing or whatever that is. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, your experience with the ayahuasca, and it was like you said, you know, kind of healing or nurturing yourself, and again that cultivating, you know, your own center of creativity, that's really important and valuable. And I think ultimately, like, I don't know, I feel like this is happening to you for a reason, and you're obviously like a really amazing and talented person, and very capable and accomplished, and I just think that, you know, this is all gonna come back around, and you have like a really great gift to share with the world.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to share, or any other perspective or reflections?
Yeah, I just think that there's a line like "follow your bliss" like by Joseph Campbell, and it seems like kind of cliche and can feel really hard to do in our world. But I think we are tasked with making that like the ultimate priority. And yeah, there can be a level of grief to these things that people don't really talk about. Like an identity crisis, you know, whatever. But yeah, following your bliss, I think is the message there. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad that this came up in this interview, because I talk to friends, and, you know, they maybe aren't happy at their corporate jobs, and there is this fear, and I think there are real ramifications, you know, and what you're talking about. So that's a real, it's like a threat, you know, and you at least confronted that, and you went through it, you know. So I think even that's just notable, and just the fact that, you know, I'm happy to hear that once you got to Bend, some positive things started to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I, like I said, this isn't, it's not the end of the story, obviously. So,
No.
yeah.
Yeah. I know I'm trying to decide if I need to move to Arizona. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But thanks, Rich.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, Milsia.
Yeah.
Thanks for telling your story.
Yeah.
It's a really powerful story, and I want this to be like maybe some consolation or inspiration to people who are either going through this or thinking about embarking on this journey. That it's like you're still here, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we've shared a lot of good times together, and
Mm-hmm.
none of these community amazing moments would be happening, if you hadn't taken that leap and stuck with yourself through all that. And
Yeah. Sticking with yourself.
stick with just kind of
Yeah.
to keep going and look what just these past few days
Mm-hmm.
we've been hiking, we've been building houses together and
Mm-hmm.
sharing meals and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
that's everything I want in my life, and
Mm-hmm.
that's only happening because each of us kind of leapt into the unknown, and we're just like dealing with everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I will say too, I think you've really set an intention here, and you seem to be doing it consistently, and that is permeating and being felt by people, and they're being drawn to this place because of that.
Yeah.
So, and they can feel it when they're here too, and it's like an incomplete project, and that's the other thing about the Mojave Center was like that in between, that limbo, like Nicolette and Ian are kind of living in that in between. And I struggle with that. It's like I want it to be done. I want to just like get to the end piece. And you're in the in between here, and really we are all in the in between all the time.
Yeah.
So that has also been like a cool lesson, is like, yeah, like enjoying the journey or whatever. So cliche, all these things, but so true,
It's a process.
Yeah. So yeah.
Well, thanks. Thanks for taking the time, and thanks for sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for asking me these questions.
Yeah,
it's really
of course.
sweet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, there you have it. And stay tuned for more of these stories.
Yeah, stay tuned.